Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Lady K Chat, a podcast that is designed for men and women to become better versions of themselves, which is broadcast every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Various subjects will be spoken upon, such as relationships, health and wellness, personal development, wealth building, children, and so much more. She is a two-time Amazon best-selling author, an international speaker, and life coach. She is Lady K. And now for your host, Lady K.
Let me rewind because you said something very, very interesting. You can't convert the guy into something that he's not ready to become. It's very, very key. I mean, the great philosopher Chris Bridges, aka Ludacris, said it. You can't turn a hoe into a housewife. Because a hoe's backbone.
Right.
It's as damning as it sounds, it's true.
Right.
But with the caveat of this, you have to understand what he wants, and you have to understand what he wants out of this. Because again, if he's just saying, I just want you for the night, or I just want you whenever I feel like I need you, or I want something to grow on. Now, I understand that there are some women who are not ready to accept that, and then there are some women who are willing to accept that.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is, ladies, if a guy tells you what he's all about, believe him.
Right.
And fellas, stop coming in half-ass saying, oh, I want this when you want something else.
Right. And that's very misleading. And when you mislead a person on, you're pretty much, you're not even that you're lying to them, but you're lying to yourself. And that's not good, because eventually your dirt is going to surface and it's not going to be pretty, because once she finds out what the real deal is, you broke her trust. It is very hard. You know, once the trust is broken, it's like, do I really want to go out? Do I want to go back? And do I actually want to put in the effort? And this is why people are so quick to move on, because you know what? They're like, I'm not even trying to work on that because I don't even feel that relationship is worth it. Sometimes, I'm being honest with you, it's not. Especially if you're just single, you're just dating. But when you come into a marriage, that's a different ball game. But that takes time and preparation and work. And talking about the mindset of a married man, you know, you told me what are the benefits for a married man, right? But as far as when that man decide, you know, to bring another life to this earth with his woman, I think, you know, that changes a man, you know, perspective as well too. So it's like, what do some men, you know, want for their children? Meaning, what type of image are they portraying to their kids?
Okay, I'll answer that question with the question.
Okay.
What do you want your kids to become?
Mm-hmm.
That's the real question that everybody asks themselves. Because here's the thing. Now, I'm speaking from a perspective of, one, me being a child at one point and having mentors mentor me to guide me to where I am today. Now, I'm not going to say, well, I have kids and I know what I want for them. I don't have any kids, but I do have nieces and nephews, and I see the direction they're going, and I try to steer them as best I could in the right direction. Now, to answer your question, most guys want it is different when it comes to girls and boys. But there are certain things that are pretty much the same. One, we want you to be successful. In some cases, more successful than we are. And I think a lot of times, and I'll speak from a perspective of, say, someone who was born and raised in the 1930s and 40s, they want something better for them. Their kids want their kids to be better than what they had to go through. In other words, they don't want them to go through oppression. They don't want them to go through, you know, sitting in the color only dining areas or drinking out of a water fountain that says blacks only. They don't want them to go through that. Then we'll speak for the people who were born in the 50s and 60s. They don't want them to go through oppressed school systems, or they don't want them to go through certain aspect that they had to go through. And now we're speaking from the perspective of people who were born in the 80s and 90s. They want them to own businesses. They want them to understand what it means to own your own stuff and to be proud of who you are, and understanding that what you see on the media may not be factual. It just may be some level of propaganda. But that's just an example there. Now, for boys, they want their boys to be tough, and they want their boys to be men, and they want their boys to take care of their family.
I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
Define tough. Define that.
It's whoo. I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but oh well. They don't want their boys to act feminine. And what I mean by don't act feminine is don't want them to say certain words. They don't want them to act a certain way. They don't want them to look at certain images and say, oh, that's cool. Things like that. And that's the best way I can answer it without offending people. But also, I also want them to know that when they get knocked down, you want them to get back up, dust yourself off, rub some dirt on it, move forward. They want them to act tough. And what I mean by tough is they want them to act like men with some level of machismo, some level of an ego, some level of some type of, prominence of I'm a man.
Right.
That's what it means. Now, for a daughter, simple. They want to portray what a man should treat them like. At least they should do that.
Right.
Now, I'll be honest with you. There are some men out there who did what they did, and they end up getting a daughter, and they're praying to God that they don't end up someone who will like them. Or they want to say, okay, there is practically no guy going to be good enough to date my daughter, which I find very, very interesting, because at the end of the day, you can't just say, oh, they're going to find somebody like me. No, that's not the case. If you raise them correctly, they know who to look for. They know who to look for. You can't just say, well, you're not going to date until you're 25 years old, or until I'm old, or until I'm gone, or whatever the case may be. Right. You have to raise them to be able to make sure that the choices they make are good choices for them, and also for something that's long term. Because a lot of times this is what I see. I see a lot of guys say, well, I want to make sure that this guy treats my daughter right. Okay. If you raise them to make sure they are treated correctly, then it doesn't matter what guy approaches them. They're going to automatically know this is what I don't want. Now, I understand that there are some people out there that want a bad boy every so often. And then they realize that bad boy ain't what it was.
Right.
Sorry, I had to say that. But it's just more of a level of, if you raise them correctly, men and women, if you raise them correctly and they raise them with some type of morals and some type of standards and some type of principles, it doesn't matter what comes at their direction. They're going to know, oh, I don't want that, but that looks fine. You know what I mean?
Okay. Manny, you said a mouthful. You said a mouthful, but I got to go back. I got to go back to something you said. You said something key, but I'm going to add to it. So you were talking about the dynamics that, you don't have kids yet, but you have nieces and nephews, right? So sometimes women, before we have kids, you already know, we already plan our life in our head. Like, they think about how they want their kids to be, how they want their husband to be, how their lifestyle to be, right? So I have to ask you a personal question. So even though you do not have kids yet, or you even allowing yourself to create some type of space of trying to imagine, well, what will my kids look like? How will I want to, want them to grow up? What's important to me that I want them to instill in them? Do those questions come to your mind when you're thinking about, when it's time for you to have children?
Yes. And the reason why I think like that is because a lot of times we look at ourselves and how we came up. Because a lot of times we look at from the standpoint of, okay, I grew up poor. Not saying I did, but I'm saying,
right.
Like the person say, I grew up poor. I grew up with less than what everybody else had.
Right.
Because they want to make sure that person don't go through what they went through. Like, I'll be honest with you, I'm speaking for myself. There's two things I don't want my kids to go through whenever I have kids. One, I don't want my kids to wear Payless shoes. Because the reason why I say that is because, and I thank God that this store closed, because when it closed for good, I was lighting up Roman candles. Because I was teased as a kid wearing less than adequate shoes from Payless shoes. And yes, I am bashing Payless shoe stores. But the thing was, because I was that one person where everybody wearing Adidas and everybody knows you got the 3 stripes, my shoes had 5. Okay? It was embarrassing, and trust me, the ridicule I went through on a regular basis because I didn't have Nike or Adidas or Reeboks or whatever, and I ended up getting Payless shoes. Now, could I afford the Nike shoes? Yes. But then you always have that one person, i.e. your mother, always tell you, you're not going to a fashion show, you're going there for an education.
Absolutely.
That's what I did. Now, the second thing I want to make sure is, and this is something that we can talk about in another show, is I don't want my kids to be bullied. And the reason why I don't want my kids to be bullied is because I went through that. And the reason why I went through that is because I didn't open my mouth to express how I felt. And I could talk about this without being emotional. What I'm saying is a lot of times we tend to not understand how to feel about when certain things come up. For instance, if somebody tells you you're fat, or somebody tells you you dress like someone who's homeless, or you don't have the right skin color for that type of clothing. Yes, those things are bullying, but you have to understand as a parent, you have to explain to your children as you listen. These type of actions are not acceptable and they're not normal because of who you are and what we raised you to. Now, some people may not have those same morals and standards and principles as you do, but you stand on your own morals and principles where it works for you, and they have to do what they have to do to make themselves feel better.
Absolutely.
About themselves. So 9 times out of 10, hurt people hurt people.
Hello.
So that's what I always look at. But then on top of that, this is the third one. This is the annex. One thing I will always do with my kids, whenever I have kids, is explain to them why I don't want certain things for them. Like, for instance, if I tell them, no, we're not eating at McDonald's today, and if they ask, well, how come? I'm not going to come out and say, because I said so. As a kid and as an adult, I hate that excuse. I hated that excuse.
Right.
I hate because I said so. That doesn't tell me anything. What I would say is this, because we have food at home and that we need to eat. And then if they come back and say, well, why can't we have McDonald's? That's when I'll come back and say, okay, I just gave you a reason. I just gave you why. What else are you looking for? Things like that. And then hope to God we never have to take it there. But that's basically what I would look at from a perspective of me, Manny, when it comes to kids. My own kids, never had my own kids.
Right, but I think everything that you hit on the nail was like so needed because you said a mouthful. Not only was this a lesson, for the ladies to take notes on what men want, but also this also give you a space, and I hope other men as well, to speak freely about the things you want and just be honest, because to be honest, that's all we want. And I understand every female is different, so your approach may have to be different, but sometimes men stay in relationship longer because they don't want to hurt the woman. But to be honest, you are hurting her because you don't even want the relationship. So the more you stay, the more you do damage. I know it's hard to separate, but just separate. You know what I'm trying to say? And let her be her, and let her free, and let her find the man that deserve her. So I'm speaking to those players. Now, the ones that want the long-term commitment, Manny, like you said, beautiful. I'm happy you are in that mind space, and I'm happy that you are prepping yourself for your family so you can have healthy ways and healthy indications. I think that's very important. So, Manny, I just want to thank you for just giving out some key points today on what men want. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we end?
A couple things. One, fellas, it's 2020. Okay? about to be 2021, and hope to God that next year will be better than this year. Let's pray that happens. But what I'm saying to you, and I'm from one man to another, we need to do better. We need to do better as men. We need to do better as Black men. We need to do better as people who hold a responsibility of being a husband or being a father or being an uncle or being a son or whatever. You have to understand what your role is and do it the best of your ability. Don't just say, well, my father didn't do this to me or I didn't understand. No, you have that opportunity to learn. And what I'm saying is you have that opportunity to learn from people who are successful at it. Now, thankfully, I had 3 people that were successful for me. My grandfather, may he rest in peace, my father, and my uncle. Those 3 people literally paved the way of how I'm supposed to be as a man in these times right now. Now, am I constantly learning and constantly evolving? Yes, and you should too. What I'm saying is, fellas, do better. Ladies, take notes, because you have to understand that the person you're going to be with long term has to come correct to you. Don't just half-ass it, okay? Because he's going to do it. Point blank in the story. You just got to set the standards.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Absolutely.
I wish I could say more, but I know this podcast only has a certain amount of time, and trust me, I can go off.
Dude, I'm going to bring you back. We're going to do something additional because this is good. I really appreciate it. Ladies, I hope you took key notes. Fellas, I hope you're listening too, because maybe it might be time to evolve yourself and step your game up. So everyone, I hope you have a fantabulous night. Continue to follow us here on IG, Facebook, and YouTube at the Lady K Chat Podcast. And please check out our website for our products and services at www.LadyKEnterprises.com. And everyone, you have an awesome night. Lady K.